Here in stage 3, camera and lighting, we're going to apply some lights to the scene and we'll progress with the quality over the duration of the scene. So we'll start out with something very basic and we'll work our way up and start to get a nice looking feel overall. So some of the tools that we'll take a look at. In this stage we're going to create a background plane and actually lay the logo down on the floor just to get a nice camera view. We'll then take a look at how we can create a camera in the scene from our creation menu. We'll look through that camera and assign our side panel to the camera, and we'll take a look at the resolution gate so that we can find out exactly how we're going to render our scene. Once we have our camera view locked in, we'll start creating lights in the scene. Our lights can be found again from the creation menu, and we're going to focus with point lights. With these lights, we're going to focus with the color attributes, intensity attributes, and also turning shadows on and off so that we can control the lighting in the environment so we get an overall, again, nice approach to the lighting of our logo. So now let's create the shot that we're going to create before we start setting up the lighting. So kind of setting the staging. Now here you have a lot of options. You can create a perspective view, you can create a straight on view, you could even render from the front view for that matter. Now just to add a little bit more dynamic interest, I'm going to switch over to my 4-view layout from my toolbox. We've used this tool before. And in the front view, I'm going to zoom out and I'm going to create a background plane. That way we can create some nice drop shadows on my logo. So you can feel free to follow along with this step, or if you'd like just a logo in a black background, you don't have to create this background plane. Now in my polygon shelf, I'm going to create a new type of geometry we haven't created yet. I'll create a polygon plane. And we can create this very simply by left mouse clicking and dragging. And as soon as we release the mouse, it'll create that geometry. Now I'll just center this up on my logo approximately and take a look at this in my 3D view. You can see I created it nice and large, that way that if I look from different camera angles, I won't be able to see the background in behind, so I could assign a color to this. So the exact size isn't very important. I just made sure it was large enough that it would be larger than my camera view. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I could render from the front, but I'm going to try and lay my logo down on the floor. I think that'll just give it a nice presentation. You can feel free to rotate or scale your logo as well. And to lay this on the floor, I need everything, so I'm going to select all the elements by clicking and dragging. So I have my background plane and my logo. And if I try using my rotate tool, hitting E on the keyboard for my rotate hotkey, if I rotate right now, see how the objects rotate about their own central pivot? Well, that's not going to work for me. So what I'll do is I'll create a group so that I can rotate this as one single instance. So I can find my group tool in the edit menu, and under edit I'll scroll down and find group. You can see the hotkey is also Control G. So this just creates a single container. That way I can rotate everything as a single object. So I'll start to rotate this down flat on the floor. That way I can get a nice camera angle of it laying on the floor. And with my rotation, you can see it still has a slight angle. So here in either the channel box or in the attribute editor, I can type in an exact angle. And for rotation or typing in transforms, I like to use the spreadsheet on the channel box. So in the channel box, you can see that we're using the rotate X value. So in rotate X, I'm going to type in -90. So that way I just make sure that I'm at a perpendicular, a nice, clean, level floor laying ground. So now I'll be able to size up on my logo laying on the ground. And again, this camera angle is purely artistic design, so feel free to have your logo standing, lay it down on the ground, or maybe take a picture from underneath and see how that changes the look and feel of your final render. Next, as we get into the composition of creating our render and setting up lights, we need to be able to navigate about 3D space, but have a set camera, a camera like on a tripod, for example. And so to do that, let's go ahead and create a camera. Now we can create the camera from our creation menu. So that, again, very logical where we'd find that tool. So we'll go to Create, we'll come down to Cameras, and I'll just create the default camera type, just a standard camera. When I create that in my perspective view, you can see you get this nice little camera gizmo that we'll be able to take our renders from. And let's take a look at how we can actually look through this camera. So in our panel toolbar, I'm going to come down to my side view, and I haven't really used this side view. It's not too important to me right now. So we can actually modify our panels to be any view that we need. For example, I'm going to turn this panel into my camera. So in my panel toolbar, under the panel menu, I'm going to hit Panels, and in Perspective Options, here's the default perspective I see up here, but here's the camera 1 that I just created. So I'm actually going to switch to camera 1. And now as I navigate my camera 1, you can see how it actually moves my camera object in the scene. So you'll find that looking through the camera is much easier than trying to move the camera object and rotate it to get the camera view that you're looking for. So here I'll just size things up in my viewport so that we can create the render that we're looking for. Now again, just a recap from stage 2, we see our material textures in our perspective view, but we don't see those here in our camera view. So do you remember how to turn that back on? Well, just as review, we use our texture icon from our panel toolbar. So there we're able to see the textures that we've applied here in the view. Now, depending on the size of your monitor, the panels may be squashed or they may be elongated. It's really different between everybody's monitor. So when we create our render, we need to make sure that we're able to see exactly the image that we're going to produce. And we have a very simple tool to help us to do that. Again, it's found from our panel toolbar since we're modifying how our panel looks, and it's called the resolution gate. It's this little white square with a blue sphere icon. What this does is it brings up a marquee render region, and this shows us exactly that when we hit the render button, what the image proportions are going to look like. So I'll be able to see if we're going to crop any of our logo off in our final render or how things will look. So as you're setting up your camera, I'd recommend turning on the resolution gate so you can see exactly how the final render is going to look. So I'll just adjust my camera view, pick something. We may modify this a little bit later, but just get a default for our test renders. And now what's nice is as I set up lights or adjust my materials, I can navigate in my 3D scene, but I have my locked camera view where we'll be able to create our renders from. So to test that out, let's select our camera view, and we'll come up and hit the render icon. So there we've rendered, and you can see that the render view is coming from our camera. So this is our starting point before we create light, so let's go ahead and keep this image. And this is the first step, so go ahead and follow along at this point. Pause the video, and what you'll want to do is create your camera. So just to recap, remember we created our camera from our camera menu. Then in our panels toolbar, we hit perspective camera to change our panel to actually look through the camera. Then we used our orbiting tools using the Alt left mouse, middle mouse, and right mouse click to align our camera how we'd like to render. And we use this tool in our panel toolbar, the resolution gate, to help us see exactly what the render region is going to look like. So once we've got all that sized up, we're ready to start creating lights and doing a few test renders.